Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're watching this show. As always, thank you for tuning in on the Tower UNN. I'm your host, Desire, and every Sunday we come to you with the Tower UNN. Today, our main theme, we're going to be talking about how can the misled start to redefine the words of leadership and what leadership is. But before we go into today, let's first start with the national anthem.
Oh, Uganda, may God uphold thee. We lay our future in thy hand. United, free, for liberty, together we'll always stand. Oh, Uganda, the land of freedom, our love and labor we give, and we've neighbors all at our country's calling, peace and friendship.
Welcome back from the national anthem. With me today, I have a guest in the studio. Today, we're going to be talking to an elder, and it's going to be Senior Remigius Kintu, who has been in the spectrum of Uganda's politics as far back as Idi Amin's regime, as far back as Obote II, and also the author of one of the documents that have been covered rampantly on this channel about the tragedies of the Tutsis in the Rwandese genocide, a topic that has been brushed over by many for the continuation of misrule and Kagame's leadership right now in present-day Rwanda, but also the tragedies of the genocide that were never discussed and no one was ever called accountable for them. So I would like to introduce our guest to come on and introduce himself, but it is an honor that we do get to host him today, a senior like him, an elder with all the knowledge and experience that he can bring into this show to further, expand our understanding of revolutions, our understanding of the political question of being Africans, Ugandans, or Mugandans, down to your ethnic group, and the knowledge that we get to acquire from these interactions. So, if our guest could please introduce himself, and we can pick on from there.
Thank you very much, Muchara Nakauka, for hosting us today on this great day, which in our Christian faith is when we remember the Passion of Jesus Christ. Today is Palm Sunday, and for those of you who have been to church or gone to church, I wish you a blessed Palm Sunday. And I'm looking forward to sharing with you some wonderful ideas that we are all going to exchange. Remember, knowledge is power. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and definitely knowledge remains power, or the light that can lead us to where we want to be. I will then call for a state anthem, and if the producer the state anthem, that's the anthem today that we're going to listen to, and for viewers to then just let us experience Busoga's state anthem.
Bakabino yego twesimyeino olwaina ifono okusoga kibumba yetuwa olw'ekirago ekyekikolo tweyimbenga usoga tebekerenga ensenese tuli bakabino yego twesimyeino olwaina ifono okusoga kibumba yetuwa olw'ekirago ekyekikolo tweyimbenga usoga tebekerenga ensenese abantu mwena obusoga mwenge twisanyenga tulemerese bantu naga omutwe gwaife mwene tufuna omwoyo omwamufu tugonzaganyenga emina ya uganda eno etebekere bakabino yego twesimyeino olwaina ifono okusoga kibumba yetuwa olw'ekirago ekikolo tweyimbenga usoga tebekerenga ensenese ensozi nikira nkanine emivule n'obukombe bwa busoga obutawawo ife tubotisete tulwanisenge endwaire obwavu n'okutamana tuli bakabino yego twesimyeino olwaina ifono okusoga kibumba yetuwa olw'ekirago ekikikolo tweyimbenga usoga tebekerenga ensenese yego twesimye binaife busoga etala lya uganda ensulo ya uganda waita mu uganda n'otatuuka ku mwidinda enkuni ya uganda obogisubirwa tuli bakabino yego twesimyeino olwaina ifono okusoga kibumba yetuwa olw'ekirago ekikikolo tweyimbenga usoga tebekerenga ensenese tuli bakabino yego twesimyeino olwaina ifono okusoga kibumba yetuwa olw'ekirago ekikikolo tweyimbenga usoga tebekerenga ensenese
Welcome back from the state anthem. That was from Busoga State, and as I said before, all of us to observe and what we can pick. And I always forget that actually the source of the Nile, or what is referred to the source of the line, is actually in Busoga State. So that's always a good reminder to know where even these big body waters or these landmarks or geographical formations that are wonders to the world, where they are and what they mean to the people or the indigenous people in those areas, and think about how we define nature even within just our indigeneity. As I said before, it's really an honor for me to host you on this show, to even have this discussion in this time. And I think to start things off, the first question that I think I'm going to pose, I had this question while going through the report that you did write about the tragedy of the report that you wrote about the truth behind the Rwandan tragedy. And I was thinking about the relationship that then started to form between Rwanda and Uganda as former colonies now emerging into independent African states, and the infiltration that happened with the Tutsis in Uganda. And I think for my first question, I wanted to ask, how does Uganda, as a country that was seen to have no radical direction per se, in comparison with all the countries around it, how does that atmosphere that no one expected Uganda to be radical, how does that create an atmosphere that benefited or that led to all the different wars from Milton, then from the first time Milton as prime minister ousting the Kabaka, then you have Idi Amin, then you have again Obote too, then you have the 1980s Bush war start, because a lot of people say they did not understand what was or the radical reason behind that war. Where in our history gap there for us to go back and revise and fill in to what leads up to that, and the radical message that was behind these uprisings that never got poured down into the next generation.
Thank you very much. That's a very good and a very wide subject to discuss. I don't know if we can have enough time to cover the entire spectrum. However, we can look at it this way. The tragedy or the problem of Uganda has been leadership. Leadership, someone might say, well, we had leaders. Yeah, you might. However, we have to define who is a leader. A leader, and I would say a good leader, must have his feet on the ground and his head above the clouds. A good leader must have his feet on the ground and head above the clouds. If you look at that phrase, you can find pieces where we have been missing. And the tragedy that has followed up to 1980 stems from that empty space whereby the so-called leaders did not have their feet on the ground and they did not have their heads above the clouds. By that I mean, you must be well grounded within your own people, starting precisely with where you come from and a large picture of the entire Uganda, which is a constellation of so many different, you can call it a tribal or national identity, and bring them all together into one Uganda without forgetting where you come from. A very clear example is just what we have just gone through recently. The loss of this wonderful man called Jacob Olanya. And I can use this man as an example. Jacob Olanya comes from the Acholi area of Uganda. What we know that has befallen that group of Ugandans, the Acholis, during this reign of Madras Museveni, how can you be from that group of people and be able to praise Museveni for a job well done? Even a stupid person or a baby can see that what Mr. Oranya gave in his very popular speech praising Museveni's leadership leaves one totally disgusted. Now, we have had these kind of leaders who are just interested in filling their stomachs and their pocketbooks. And by the way, this has been going on since with the day of our independence. I remember very well Mr. Godfrey Binaisa declaring publicly, and of course he's the one who coined the word "tugudde mu bintu." Tugudde mu bintu in Luganda means that now, the literal translation is to say, we have fallen into things. But what it means, we have found a bounty, a bonanza. Now we are going to wash off all our poverty, our financial marginalization, we are going to grab whatever there is and make ourselves filthy rich, which they did. But did they have their feet on the ground? No. Did they have a vision beyond the clouds, what we want Uganda to look like 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, 20 years from now? No. So they were just interested in themselves just as much as the ones we are looking at right now who are with this murderous Museveni. They are just filling their pockets. As long as they have given me 20, 30, 40, I am okay. Even if my mother, my aunt, my uncle, my neighbor where I come from is suffering or has been killed, body was dumped, I don't care. As long as they have given me 300 million shillings, I can build myself a mansion when my people are living in shacks. This is the tragedy of Uganda, leadership. We do not have good leaders who have their feet on the ground and their heads above the clouds. They are just interested in themselves. Others, when they are being given praises, giving them all these wonderful titles, and you'll be surprised, feel like they have reached the optimum level of success as long as they can call them honorable at any occasion, whether funeral or wedding or church gathering or whatever. As long as they call me honorable, I am done. I have arrived. That is not leadership. That is where we have a problem. Therefore, the people, as you said, the misled, the masses, I would remove the word misled and say the masses have to redefine who a good leader should be. They must take precaution and then scrutinize whoever is running his mouth to see who can be a good leader and who cannot, and don't give those kind of bad people positions of power, because once you give them the position of power, they are going to inflict pain, losses, and death to millions of people, as these ones we have today have done. And by the way, that goes for all the politicians, including religious leaders who do not give a damn about the suffering of their people or their flock. And they are just interested in filling their own pockets or being praised by the evil dictator. For me, as a Christian and a Catholic for that matter, I recall very well when I was baptized and when I was given confirmation. I remember the questions raised was, do you denounce Satan? You say yes. Do you denounce Satan and all his tricks and actions? Yes. Do you denounce, oh, I mean, you know that ritual. Any Christian or Catholic for that matter remembers that ritual. Now, if you made that vow before God, how in the world could you today turn around and dine with Museveni, a murderer, a thief, a witch, and a foreigner who has captured our country, and then you tell me that you still believe in your Christian oath of faith? No. I don't know about my brothers who are Muslims. I have Muslims in my own family too. Oath when they are being, but I believe they too have something similar to ours as Christians. You cannot be honest to your faith, honest to your family, honest to your tribe, honest to your nation, and dine and hug and praise this murderous Museveni's regime. You cannot. That's why I stood up and I annoyed some of my brothers who are from Acholi, because I condemned the Oranya and I still do. You cannot be a good Acholi knowing what this NRM has done to the Acholi people, simply because they have praised you, they have given you the money, you have You are building a big mansion when your own people are sleeping in the shacks, when your people are being hardened in concentration camps where they are subjected to conditions which are going to shorten their lifespan. You have been in that office with the power and the responsibility and have done bloody nothing, nothing to help your own people, leave alone the entire country of you. That's not ours. That's not leadership. And anyone who calls him a leader, I say, my goodness, go buy that old dictionary. I remember the one I used when I was learning English 100 years ago, called Micro West. At least start with that dictionary. If you are not the English dictionary, get that old dictionary. Check out the word, what is leadership? And I can tell you, these kind of people you are proving today, whether they are in government or in the opposition, don't fit the definition of leadership.
And I think and I think that that brings me right to my next question, because there seems to be not really a confusion, but the masses always are the ticket mill for people who masquerade around as leaders and end up in places of power or in parliament. I won't even call them places of power, but end up sitting in parliament. And the masses' misfortunes are always being used, and there has been an understanding that the conditions of existence of the masses will change once someone who looks like them or is like them ends up in parliament. But when you look at Uganda's parliament, the majority of people who are in parliament are people who are just, if not going to get wealthy, are going to get wealthier. And that seems to be the condition for leadership, or the currency for leadership. It's you go in there to participate as just to become richer, and it seems to be a message that is not trickling down as amongst us in the masses, that the more people who go in parliament to get richer keep doing that, that only equates to less circulation of resources, and the masses being able to participate economically in their own economy. If you could please speak to that.
That's right. That's right. These people go in there not to represent the people whom they um, hoodwinked to elect them, or because I don't even think they were elected. They just stole the votes and got in parliament. You see, that lack of leadership, that virtue, created the conditions favorable for these Batusi people who came into the country as refugees to take advantage of that virtue and they take over the country. Literally, they took over the country when we're just out there ngangering around, without giving leadership to our own country. In other words, we neglected the so-called leaders, in a quote with a small L. They neglected the country, and they made it easier for the Batusi to take over the country. We have gone through this narration. How many of our own people abandoned their own indigenous Ugandans and supported Museveni during the war of 1980? So many of them. And they used the very cheap reasons why they abandoned their own indigenous and supported this refugee who came into our country as a refugee because of various reasons. Among them was religious discrimination, and that played a very, very major role in why some indigenous Ugandans, including notable ones, to support Museveni. Another reason is if I join Museveni's camp, he is going to give me a big position. I remember Mayanja Nkanji, who was Museveni's Minister of Finance. Mayanja Nkanji was questioned by a British journalist to verify if he is aware that excuse me, that is Museveni actually a Rwandese? And Mayanja Nkanji admitted, he said, yes, Museveni is a Rwandese, and we know it. But personally, I don't care because he has made me minister. I am eating well. I have a big salary and big privileges, and my wife and the children are all comfortable. I don't care what happens to the country. And yet, there are some people who are going to say, oh, we had a Muganda in the cabinet, Mayanja Nkanji, so we are represented. And I mean, how can you say such a thing? That man was not representing Baganda or Uganda. He was representing himself. In other words, he was a junior hyena in a gang of hyenas eating the spoils of whoever had killed the carcass. Because he was not representing us. And he comes from, I can bet you, not even many people knew that Mayanja Nkanji was a Munabudu like me, because he represented nobody except himself. He's just out there greedy to eat, and we have many of those, many such a people like Mayanja Nkanji. That is the tragedy of Uganda. Now, if you look at all the events that have taken place since we got independence, that has been the tragedy. We have the so-called KY Chitole in Parliament. A bunch of people just sat down and they filled the 21 slots that were allocated to Buganda, and they started filling their own people. They were just a bunch of hyenas. For example, Dr. Luimbazi Zake, who is originally from Bulemezi, was representing Maogolende Kabula in parliament. Yet Maogolende Kabula are in Masaka district. These guys, he doesn't even come from there. But he was sitting, I would probably use the word kusitama. Squat. Kusitama is a dirtier word than squatting. He was kusitama in parliament representing Kabula. And Maogola, when he doesn't even know how that place looks like. That's the tragedy of Uganda. These were self-seekers. Some bloggers have used the word mafia. Yes, we are now being ruled by a Rwandese mafia. And some of these non-Rwandese, those who purport to be indigenous Ugandans, inside this camp, including people like Oranya, who has just been killed, they were there participating in this camp of foreign hyenas so that they can get a piece of bone or crumbs from the table of these hyenas that came from Rwanda. That is the tragedy. I believe and I pray that you Ugandans can now open your eyes, get yourselves together. Let us have a new Uganda founded on a federal system whereby each indigenous group of Ugandans, the Baganda, Basoga, Banyoro, Batoro, Acholi, Madi, Teso, Lugbara, you name it, Karamajong, should determine and decide and govern their own area within a united Uganda founded on a federal system, whereby we respect the human life, whereby we respect the ethnic identity of our people, whereby we redefine who a Ugandan is and who a foreigner is, and how each foreigner can live freely and comfortably within Uganda without creating these conditions that have brought about death to millions of our people.
And I think for the purposes of our viewers, for people who have not read the report, I'll ask just a couple of questions, just a couple of questions to clear up for the audiences what is meant here when we do talk about the country being what's the word in English, captured or capsized by foreigners, what that means. What does the Tutsi infiltration mean in Uganda's case? And I think that I'm going to take us a little bit back in history. And the first question I'm going to ask you is going to be in regards to if you can explain. I only ask this because it also helped me better understand the histories and how this is now what Uganda is currently. What was the relationship between the Hutus and the Tutsis before the the Belgian colonizers went into the region, and how did they use that to further secure that as a colony? Because I think that gives a good mirroring to what Uganda is at this point in time.
Oh, thank you very much for that question. I think it was thoroughly exposed in that report which I wrote some years ago, The Tragedy of Rwanda. The Tutsis who moved into that region from Ethiopia-Eritrea corridor, where they were kicked out because of their, in Uganda we say oblogo. They were very notorious for poisoning people. They were kicked out of there and drifted as refugees into this corridor of Africa, now Rwanda and Burundi. They manipulated the native people there, and they took over the country because of two reasons. One, they used their women to trap the local leadership of the Hutus and the Twa of that region. And one historical day, they decided to poison everybody who was in a position of leadership using their women. Once they succeeded in that, they took over the country. Then they imposed a reign of terror which lasted about 600 years in Rwanda and Burundi. The reign of terror on the Hutus and the Twa was so horrible that it can take days to describe. However, when the Belgians took over that country from the Germans, the Germans were the first ones to rule that place for a short period of time until World War I, when the Germans were defeated and they lost the colony. When they lost the colony, the Belgians took it over. Yeah, the Belgians took it over. Now, the Belgians found that the Tutsis had established a rule of terror which was thorough, ruthless, and comprehensive. They didn't want to disturb the situation because it could have made it very difficult for them to rule those colonies. They left the Tutsis in their place and made a good decision that as long as you do not disturb our colonial agenda in the region, you can do whatever you want on the other local people. And so they maintained the status quo. The Tutsis continued being ruthless and dangerous to the rest of the population, in spite of the fact that the Tutsis were a very small minority in the country. By 1950s, the Tutsis, especially in Rwanda, they were no more than 10% of the population, but they controlled 98% of the country. For example, all the leadership in the local administration was run by Tutsis. Education was a Tutsi privilege. Hutus could not even be priests in the church, in spite of the fact that there were so many Catholics. The country was predominantly Catholic, but they could not allow Hutus to be church leaders. They couldn't be in any position of leadership. And yet, they had forced the Hutus to be cheap labor, or rather slaves, for the Tutsis. Every Hutu had to put in so many hours of free labor to a Tutsi master every day in order to be given the right to live, if I can put it that way. Now, way back in the mid 50s, the Catholic Church in Rwanda realized that this cannot be allowed to continue. But they were powerless because they could not confront the Belgian colonial rulers nor the Tutsi tribal rulers. But they found out that it was better to use education and emancipate the Hutus through information and education. That's when they groomed some Hutu leader activists. By then, they were not leaders, activists. Among them was Gregory Kayibanda, who was taken to Switzerland to study sociology and journalism. When Kayibanda came back to Rwanda, he was given an opportunity to be editor of a local newspaper in Kinyarwanda. And he did exactly what you people are doing on social media, educating the masses about their rights as human beings. Education awareness brought about the revolt of 1959. The revolt of 1959 came from emancipated Hutus who said enough is enough. We have to get rid of these Tutsis, their domination. So during that revolt, remember that the police, the military, the Hutus didn't have it, but they used whatever they had, mostly sticks, spears, and machetes, and overthrew the king, Kijeri, and the whole Tutsi leadership. When they overthrew them, Kayibanda took over the government, and of course, then they got independence, and Kayibanda became the president of a new independent Rwanda. The Tutsis ran into Uganda, Tanzania, and Congo as refugees. When they came to Uganda, they tried to organize a military wing to go back and reinvade their country and take over. That request, they did it after they arrived in Uganda. They termed it the Banyarwanda Youth Association. By then, we had independence, and the military Obote, as a prime minister, said, no, you cannot do that because you are in Uganda as refugees under the supervision of the United Nations Refugee Committee, UNHCR, I think that's what they called it. So, failing to do that, they started infiltrating Uganda systems and realizing the weaknesses of Uganda's leadership. They infiltrated the intelligence community. At that time, it was the GSU, General Service Unit. A good many of them, including Museveni, was a member of the GSU. And when Obote was overthrown, they shed their skin and they joined the state research of Idi Amin, while some others ran to Tanzania as refugees, which included Yoweri Museveni. But the Tutsi intelligence operatives remained in Uganda, and they were being managed by none other than, what is his name? Amama Mbabazi. Amama Mbabazi was the coordinator of this inside the GS state research. He was the coordinator of that murderous group. Later on, they formed what they call the Fronasa. But again, Amama Mbabazi was the coordinator. So all those killings of prominent people in Uganda was carried out by these Batusi people under the supervision of Amama Mbabazi. That's why I have said we should pin Amama Mbabazi to tell us where they buried our people like Beni Chiwanuka, Joseph Mubiru, Kalimuzo, and many others who were killed during Idi Amin, because he was the manager of the killing squad. Okay? But many of you, the journalists, have kept silent. They cannot confront this killer. And that's wrong. We have to confront them. Let them know that we know their crime. Now, these Batusi continued organizing while we are continuing disorganizing ourselves. If you look at all the problems we have suffered, all the leadership, all the good leaders we have lost, it was our own people who were undermining each other, who were selling our own people to the enemies. We wouldn't have lost all these great people if it wasn't some of our own people, whether they are Baganda or Achoris or Basoga, who were the ones selling our own people. Because we have screwed up brains. We are not seeing beyond the clouds. We have failed to define what I wouldn't say we have failed. So far, we have failed to define clearly within our own minds what we want Uganda to look like. It is until now that we are talking about we want Uganda that is founded on a federal system with these kind of programs in action. But a good many of our people are still talking about themselves. And of course, you have heard all these songs and dancing and all kinds of activities. We are removing the dictator. What are you talking about? You just can't say we are removing the dictator when you don't have any plan of how you want Uganda to look like. I'll give you an example. I have a friend here in America whose son got married, and the mother lived in a different town. So she went to the son's place in preparation for the wedding. And that was about 2 days before the wedding day. And she told me when she got there, the son didn't even have a bed and a mattress. And yet in 2 days he's getting married. He asked his son, where will you put the bride? You don't even, oh, mommy, I haven't. I've been so busy. I mean, come on. You are getting married 2 days from today, 2 days from now, and you don't even have a bed or a mattress. And the woman said, damn, I got in my car. She went and bought a bed, a mattress, and the bed sheets and the pillows, and they brought them. And the son was sitting there like an idiot. And this happened in Lancaster County, right here in Pennsylvania. I'm not talking about stories I don't have proof of. I was physically in that home. And the mother was so pissed off. That's exactly what we Ugandans are. You can't tell me you're moving the dictator. You don't even have a bed where you're going to sleep. Leave alone where you're going to put the bride. Come on. I haven't seen anything as stupid
and
as
I think and I think that brings me to my next question. I think we'll take this one right before the break, and it's this idea that we have been promised so easily and quickly opposition after opposition change to come with no strategic plan that actually involves us as the masses. And you mentioned something about redefining who a Ugandan is, because that is key to any revolution that we want to have as masses, and what actually this looks like Ugandan in this federal system based off of our indigeneity or the indigenous groups that actually are in that land, and juxtapositioned to, of course, how opposition just comes into politics, knows the people we're hungry for change, and promise us the skies and and sources of the river without even doing the bare minimum due diligence. How do we start as a people to really take two steps back before marching forward with any new people masquerading as leaders but are just doing clown work?
You're right to call it clown work. I think the key is education. Education, education. And I'm not talking about getting a high school diploma and go to get a bachelor's degree and a master's and a PhD. No, I'm talking about educating your mind to what I would call critical thinking. We must wake up and start educating our minds into what I would call critical thinking. People who come and give you a whole bundle of garbage and you don't even dig into it to see if there is any substance in it, then in the end you are the one who is going to be blamed because you allowed them to do that to you. You
Yeah.
cannot we cannot allow that. We must educate ourselves and we must give our people good. What we are doing in this kind of program is the kind of education people need to have, not what they want, because they don't know what they want, but they need to understand this, that a nation cannot be a nation unless you understand who you are. Some of us have dealt with different nationalities, and I can tell you, when I am with my friends from the Congo, and the Congolese tell you Ngai Congolais. When a Congolese tells you Ngai Congolais, you can even see in his face and feel in his voice that he is proud of saying, I am a Congolese. Those of you who have been to Tanzania, when a Tanzanian tells you, we are Tanzanians, you can feel the density of his voice or her voice and speech really defining being a Tanzanian. Okay? Now, you may have all kinds of views about the current war in Ukraine, but I'm telling you, the Ukrainians, you can feel we are Ukrainians, right or wrong. But can you say the same thing about Ugandans? No. Because I'm saying this with all honesty. We Ugandans, we are so divided, we are so blindfolded by our own stupidity. How many of our fellow Baganda will tell leave, don't be bothered with that. Leave that alone. You are not from there. I remember when I was publishing UDC newsletters years ago, those of you are old enough to remember, I was approached by a Muganda professor from Makerere University. He came to Washington, D.C., and we met at a dinner party. And he said, Mr. Kintu, we like what you are writing and what you are publishing, but you've spent too much time defending those Acholis. You are not an Acholi, you don't come from there. Leave them alone, let them suffer. And I looked at him, I said, sir, you're a professor at Makerere? He said, yes. Do you have Acholi students in your classroom? He said, there are some. I said, do you wish them death? He couldn't answer. Yeah, but leave those pharaohs alone. And I said, thank you very much for your comment. I'm glad I've heard it from you. Well, of course, I didn't abide by that. And then this time, during those days, when the Baganda were suffering, you couldn't hear an Acholi saying, our fellow Ugandans are suffering. No. They were totally silent. Now, when the thing turned around and Museveni raided that territory and started slaughtering them, then the same people were saying, we are being slaughtered. Oh, now you are finding out that killing is not good. It is only good when it is on the other side of the river. And I have heard so many people among Acholis who believe that Uganda stops at Karuma. The only part of Uganda which is suffering is Acholi land. That's not true. The entire Uganda is suffering. We have to get some bar of soap and wash this mess out of your brains. We have to look at Uganda, whether the sufferers are in Karamoja or in Buganda or in Acholi or in West Nile. And by the way, the first area to suffer was not Buganda. And I'm talking about suffering under Museveni's reign. The first area to suffer was Ankole.
Of course.
I wrote a report last year and said to all the Muslim countries that Museveni started killing Muslims in Ankole using UPC stalwarts like Rurangaranga and others, killing the UPC, killing the Basoga Muslims, Banyankole Muslims. After that, he started killing the indigenous Banyankole, the Bairu, taking their land to the point that right now, if you go to Ankole and you find a Munyankole who says, I'm from Ibanda or Bushenyi, look at him. He's not an indigenous Ugandan Munyankole. It is these invaders. Now they're parading themselves as Banyankole. When the indigenous Banyankole are all finished. But they were finished in silence because they could not defend themselves. And we thought that troubles are coming from the Banyankole because we claimed everybody who came from that side was a Munyankole. Kumbe not. It wasn't true. So we have to educate ourselves. We have to rediscover who we are and start looking at ourselves. Yes, you are Arab, but you are a Ugandan. Because even if you traveled out of the country, you did not travel on a Rugbara passport. You traveled on a Uganda passport, just as much as...
Yeah. So I would like the producer to take us to yes, no, fully for sure. And I think you've gone into answering. We're going to come back and talk about it more in the break because I think that's the crucial part. How do we start to redefine ourselves? As I think you've touched on it, as Ugandans, but also base that back into, of course, our indigenous ethnicities as well, and how does this start to show up in terms of understanding leadership and how power is distributed and how we hold people accountable. I into those segments right after we come back from break.
Bawansolo nga bakuba olukiiko lwabwe okusala entotto engeri gye banaasobola okweggyako omugwira wa mpologoma eyabalumba mu kibira kyabwe neyefuula kabaka waabwe ewatali yadde olukusa okuva gye bali. Wampologoma yajjanga mununuzi okubataasa ku mmese zaababbiranga ebinyeebwa byabwe kubanga yabagamba nti ewaabwe gy'asibuka bakugu nnyo mu kutega emmese eza buli kika. Era bo ewaabwe omwana azaalibwa n'akamaso mu ngalo. Era oyo yenna alemererwa bamuzaaluka mu kika kyabwe ekyabawampologoma. Kyokka beerabira okumubuuza emmere gy'alya n'omusala gwe yali yeetaaga. Baalabira awo nga bannaye batandika okubula ku kyalo omu ku omu. Baakizuula luvannyuma nnyo nti Wampologoma ye yali ababwebwena. Baasalawo beekumeekume wamu basale entotto engeri gye banaasobola okweggyako sirwajja okwoota, okukkakkana nga buli omu afunye obuvunaanyizibwa era nga buli omu afunye n'ekitundu ky'alina okukwata basobole okumegguza Wampologoma. Era baamuwangula nga newankubadde baasooka ku muti, kuba Wampologoma yali w'amaanyi nnyo ate ng'atiisa. Uganda Federal Consultative Council lwe lukiiko lwa bannayuganda abasazeewo okwegatta ewamu bateeseza eggwanga lyabwe okusobola okwenunula nga bayita mu nfuga eya federal. Naawe beegatteko. Weeyeza okusabako ku email ya ufcc@getunn.com.
Welcome back. We've come back with the Tower UNN. As I said before, I have an elder, Senior Remigius Kintu is in the studio with me today, and today we're discussing how can the masses who have been misled start to redefine what leadership is or what leadership even means. So, just rebrief from what we've been talking about. I think my next question is going to be in the direction, from my understanding so far, is that there seems to be a gap or a unifying identity amongst Uganda's ethnicities, not because they do not want to come together and unify, but because there's a gap in having leaders that are willing to build nationalism. So it seems like most of the leaders we have gotten thus far, even before the murderous regime that we have now, the genocidal regime we have now, have failed to build a national identity. And hopefully this then discussion can lead us into further discussing what federal offers us as an opportunity to actually build and start to envision ourselves in a healthy relationship of nation building or nationalism amongst all these ethnic groups. So if our guest could please speak to that.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Your point is very good. That is a task which cannot be accomplished within a week or a month or a year, but the starting point is right now. We must, and it is going to take years because we have to clean out of our own brains those stains of discrimination, those stains of tribalism and those stains of religious bigotry, which have led us to where we are now. And let's admit it. If it wasn't those stains, we wouldn't be where we are. And another thing, we have an greed. You can even put it together with the word corruption. You see, during Idi Amin's days, we had the tragedy of Magendo that came as a result of Idi Amin's regime. Magendo became a part of a way of life in Uganda. During Museveni's reign of these so many bloody years, we have greed and corruption, which have taken on a way of life, and they have contaminated many, many Ugandans to the point of virtually no return. I still believe, as a Christian, that there is always a road to Damascus, but not many people travel on it, because even that road to Damascus, the only person who remember who traveled on it successfully was St. Paul. I don't think we're going to get that many St. Pauls among Ugandans. However, we can start grooming the younger generation. Many of us, and when I say us, I'm talking about people of my age, we were very, very glad and hopeful that this new generation, which has sprung up with the People Power movement, is going to give us this opportunity to groom and develop new leaders that can correct the mistakes of the past. Unfortunately, that is not the case today. Greed, selfishness, self-sightedness, and all that goes with it have taken over under the leadership of Yoweri Museveni, to the point that almost everyone you see there has a price. Once that price is paid to him or her, it's gone. That's the tragedy.
They render useless to the masses.
They have all become totally useless. That is why when I spoke about Pol Pot in my previous exposition, someone said, maybe we need a Pol Pot in Uganda. I would say, I leave that to you. But all I'm doing is I'm giving you the facts as I know them. Then you can decide what to do with yourselves. That's not going to be me. I am not going to make those decisions, recommendations. I am just exposing what has happened in some other countries and what is likely to happen or what is happening to us. New leadership, Uganda doesn't belong to only the young generation. Uganda belongs to all of us. Old, young, man, woman, every tribe that is within the constellation of present-day Uganda. Now, we need to first be proud of who we are, because many of us are not proud of who they are. If you are a Samia, if you are a Mukedi, if you are a Mutoro, you did not bribe God to make you a Mutoro or Samia or Karamajong. Be grateful to the God who created you as a Karamajong. And after being proud of who you are, then you can say, thank God I wasn't born in Nigeria or Indonesia or Argentina. I was born in Uganda, and God knows better that the best place for me was Uganda, and I must be proud of it, I must protect it, and I must preserve it. Not for myself, but also for my children and the grandchildren and the grandchildren. That is what we need to concentrate on. After we are sure of who we are, we know very well that if I am an intercept, the line is to be my neighbors. But they are. God created them to be my neighbors as an intercept. Therefore, I must know that these are my neighbors, love them, respect them, and cooperate with them in building a very good Uganda. This is where we have to rediscover our nationality. But that is not going to come unless we are grateful for who we are. And I can tell you, there are many Ugandans who are not proud of and who are not even ready to defend what they are. They are more ready to defend their pocketbooks or to go for what will be in their pocketbooks. If they have given me a new Pajero, alhamdulillah, I'm doing well. If the devil has given me $300 million to shut up or to sell whatever, alhamdulillah, I'm going to take it and forget it, and even sell my own mother for that matter. This is where we got to start. Whether you are young, old, man, woman, whatever, educated, uneducated, poor or rich, we have to redefine ourselves. And we have to set up a new value standard to be truly Ugandans who are willing to work for the development and the stability of our country. And at the same time, we have to keep our eyes open in order never to allow foreigners to come and overrun our country.
I think then that leads me to the next question, because with these gaps in growing of nationalism always overlapping with greed and corruption, and basically a government that is being given advantage with its access to, of course, the resources and being able to milk those resources to finance the bonanza that parliamentarians and members of parliament enjoy, those comfortable lives, and ignore the masses. I think today is I would like to ask you to speak to first of all the economic conditions whereby even the govern the nation, because we as a nation, as Uganda, on paper do not we do not control our own nation, but also it becomes worse when we trickle down then to the in-country situation. So we have the external that's happening, where we have no economic control of the nation as it stands, and then you have the internal, whereby parliamentarians and all these people who are participating in politics as it stands, if not most of them, majority of them, only a few would stand out not to be being paid out to live lavish lifestyles or the elitist lifestyles that they have elected to live. Then they also get paid and keep quiet, but also do not control. And then we have the economic tragedy that's happening with the bigger gaps or the extending gaps amongst classes, and the growing of the huge class of people who are now being forced and pushed into segmented, pushed further into, if not the ghetto areas or off of their lands, into pockets in the city. So how can we start to understand and differentiate what a leader brings to the table when they start to talk about leadership in economics? Because I think this can help us as a nation to start to actually envision a leader who's going to care about our needs, because it's always the economy that is crashing the value system of livelihood.
That's right. Well, remember, there is a saying that every war is economic. There is no war that is not driven by economics. Every war. Even if you go back to the era before Christ, every war was driven by economics. Now, the corruption you have outlined stems from a leadership which is run on a unitary system. There is nothing good that is going to come out of a unitary system when a country is an independent sovereign nation. When we say sovereign nation, which means the people are the supreme owners of the country. By owning the country, we talk about government, financial institutions, economic institutions, religious, cultural, everything. The people, the citizens, the wananchi, the banamboka, they are the supreme. It's not the other way around. In a unitary government, the president is the supreme owner of the country. He can dish out whatever he wants. Now, even when you have a unitary government, the president can sit down and say, I have picked Kintu to be my ambassador. He will go to India and become ambassador. Or I want this man to be minister. But in a federal system like the United States, the president can recommend, and the Senate, which represents the people, will decide or reject, like they just approved this woman to be on the Supreme Court. They could have voted no. Even though President Biden wanted that woman to be on the Supreme Court, if the Senate didn't vote yes, that woman wouldn't make it to the Senate, to the Supreme Court. Okay? I remember when President Binaisa was in power way back then, a group of 3 guys came from Switzerland. They didn't go to the Minister of Commerce or Minister of Agriculture or Minister of Finance. They went to State House. And they proposed to Binaisa that they will give him $20 million if we can allow them to bring trailers or back in Uganda and go to Kasese and dig out all that pile of rocks and sand and soil out of which they have refined the copper. You know, when they dig the copper out of the ground, they refine, they get the copper, the trash is piled up there. It looks like a little hill. And they were going to give him 20 million shillings. They didn't say they are going to give it to the treasury. They will give it to the president if he agrees. And if Isa had agreed, they would have brought their lorries, gone to Kasese, start putting that pile of rock on the soil on the trucks, take it to the train station, take it to Mombasa, and send it to Switzerland. What was in that soil, those rocks? After you take out copper, there is something called cobalt, which remains in there. That's when I came in, and I told Binaisa, don't you dare sign this agreement with these guys. He said, what do you say? I said, I'm going to give you an answer. Give me a few days. I got on the plane, went to Paris, and got a company there. Told them what we had. They said, we shall come to Uganda and build a factory at the cost of $20 million on a turnkey basis. And the cobalt that is sitting in those rocks is worth more than $30 million estimated. And once we refine it, it will pay us $20 million for building that refinery. And you have the factory remaining there to do the work for the future production. So I came back and told Binaisa that I have found a better deal. We are going to build a factory there at a turnkey basis by this French company whose office is on Hugo Boulevard in Paris. They will build this factory on a turnkey basis, and there we shall have a factory forever and ever, and we can refine future production and probably connect with our brothers from Congo, bring their stuff there, we refine it for them, and they take back the cobalt. So the Swiss guys noticed that I screwed their deal. They came to me and they said, Kintu, who are you? I said, my name is Mr. Remigius Kintu. Yeah, we want to know who you are. I said, I've told you my name. We want to know, are you the governor of the bank? Are you the Minister of Finance? I said, no, I am a Ugandan, and my name is Remigius Kintu. They were pissed off. And got on the plane, went back empty-handed because I screwed their deal, their robbery rather. Okay? I didn't stop there. I and connected with a few friends and they raised $200 million to finance regional businesses of indigenous Ugandans. Among them was a cooking oil factory which was going to be built at the behind the Nile Brewery. What do they call that place? Mbiko. I negotiated with the mayor of Mbiko. He gave us the piece of land. We were going to build a hotel in Kampala called Bakungu Hotel. That was the name they had picked. And it was going to be on Buganda Road. And we started setting up in every region: Busoga, Acholi, West Nile, Bunyoro, Toro, whereby this money is going to finance indigenous small businesses which are productive and self-financing, so that the products of those businesses will pay back the $200 million. We negotiated with a specific bank in the United States, and the coordinators were in England. We had another coordinator in Denmark who was going to give us machinery that could do the lumber processing, mainly building up furniture manufacturing factories. I think one was going to be near Bunyoro because we are looking at the good timber from, I think, the Budongo or Budondo or Bunyoro. You know the name of that big factory there. Anyway, that did not materialize because greedy and selfish Ugandans overthrew Godfrey Binaisa within, I think it was, and the engineers were supposed to get there in the middle of May. Everything collapsed up to now. That now you can see bad leadership. Those are the products of bad leadership. If we didn't have bad leaders, those things would have put in place and it would be way ahead economically. Our people would have good jobs and our people would have good businesses, not these businesses run by Salim Saleh and his crooks from Rwanda. So we need to develop a new leadership of good Ugandans, indigenous Ugandans, and make sure that economically in each district or each state, as you call it, there is a committee that supervises the distribution of business opportunities and also the licensing of business opportunities. We shouldn't allow this our economic infrastructure. No, the infrastructure should be in the hands of indigenous Ugandans. And so is employment. It's like here in America. They will tell you very openly, first choice of employment or business opportunity, you have to be an American. If we can't find an American qualified for this job, then we can give it to a non-American. And there is nothing wrong with that. Why don't we do the same thing in Uganda? But look at what this Museveni and his hyenas have done. They glorify every foreigner to take over business at the expense of an indigenous Ugandan. And the way they use the word, those are investors. Even when they are hyenas coming to eat, investor. The word investors is superior to the word angels in our Christian faith. Because when we say there is God, then there are saints and angels. All for them, the investors. Everybody who is a foreigner is an investor and is glorified and given red carpet everywhere, walking over our own people. That has to be reversed. It should be Ugandans first. And under the federal system, every district, if we put up this investment fund, similar to that one we had received some years ago, in Busoga, for that matter, there should be a committee of Basoga people which scrutinizes to make sure that the person who wants to set up a business in Kamuli or Yiganga is a Musoga. And if it's not a Musoga, it would be a Mukedi or a chap. Okay, he's an indigenous Ugandan. That's fine. Then this committee would recommend this person getting credit. Because, by the way, you cannot run an economy without having access to credit. We must create credit, or rather capital sources, and that is going to come from savings. We have to set up indigenous banks. We should not destroy indigenous banks the way Museveni has done without land bank, bank, and all those kinds. No, if we set up a new system tomorrow, it is going to start the same day, putting pressure to the indigenous Ugandans who can come up and organize indigenous banks like the late Sulaiman Chigundu did. And we have many. If we don't have many people like Chigundu, at least we can start credit unions, because those are simple. Even if you are illiterate, you can start a credit union. We must create sources of credit through saving, and then our people can have access. And the national government should have a development fund. By the way, that fund is going to come from several sources. In the first and easiest sources, these thieves who have stolen money, as I told you earlier, that this man who was governor of the bank, when he died, there were boxes and boxes of foreign currency in his basement. And I am sure many of these hooligans, like Salim Saleh and others, you will find boxes of foreign currency in their basements. How many millions do you think we can recover from those thieves? Plenty.
We could even get gold.
If we can find it, I can bet you we can find $1 billion somewhere in their basements. But all we need is, even if we find $100 million, that is enough to start a development fund that is spread within each state, and the indigenous people will be in charge of administering and supervising the distribution of credit to indigenous business owners within those districts. It could be a man who wants to set up or has a small carpentry shop but needs to buy a few machineries to expand his production. And by the way, we have a lot of work to do rebuilding our schools, our hospitals, our administrative headquarters like Saza or county headquarters or Gombolora headquarters or whatever.
Yeah.
We give the contract to this local man to produce all the doors, the desks, the chairs for that school or that hospital or the beds, and let him expand his production. By so doing, we are financing a horizontal expansion of economic activity on the ground. And we can do the same thing in every district. By so doing, when you put people in charge of this and you are supervising them, you are deleting this mentality of corruption. Because if we put you in charge of supervising this in Busoga or in Masaka or in Hoima, and we find that you are screwing around with our money, I feel sorry for you, because we are not going to have mercy on a corrupted bastard in this operation. We're going to put you on the carpet, and you may end up sleeping in Ruzira or Kitalia or wherever we put you. Honestly, we got to be honest and we have to be clean. Let us make money in a clean way. You are not going to be poor, by the way, in this kind of activity. You are going to be very rich, but you're going to be rich in a clean way.
And I think this then brings me to the next question, which is when we discuss, because what we seem to be talking about is especially a redistribution of means to production towards the people. I think we still find ourselves in that position whereby when I used to hear this phrase, I only thought that it applied to, the time when before nations or African nations got independence, where the phrase was, the last shall become the first. But we're still the last competing to become the first, even in this era that we're living in and where we are at the moment. And I think this brings me again, as I said, to the next question of, as we redefine who a leader is, and we redefine what leadership we want, accountability and holding people accountable becomes a very key factor, because a society can only be judged upon how they distribute. Of course, you have to have both rewarding good acts and also rewarding reprimandable acts. So how do we go about keeping ourselves accountable, not only as individuals but also as a group, in terms of not only as the revolution progresses towards a more federal based, but also as we look at advancing the revolution to now a new form of governance and a redefinition of who we are and ourselves, but also recalling the people who have participated in this corrupt regime, the people who have played a huge role to Museveni's sustenance in Uganda, the people who have enabled the abuse and oppression that Ugandans have gotten in all different kinds of labor, of participation, and it has all been done with them knowing. How do we start to educate ourselves to hold them accountable? Because a lot of people are afraid to even hold the opposition accountable as it stands today. A lot of people voices to hold Besige's opposition accountable, not only regular day-to-day people, but people who are participating in politics and are academic participating. They might not be politicians, but they're producing academic work that is being taken in and read by Ugandan students or Ugandans who envision themselves to participate politically? How do we start to then make sure that all these people get are reprimanded and are held accountable, and these things are not brushed under the rug because we have the joy or the wave that we're going into a new nation?
Well, that's good. That's a loaded question. There is a saying that you can't give what you don't have. You cannot fight corruption or misguidance when you do not have, when you are part of that. You know, in the first place, it is incumbent upon the people to make sure that the leaders they put in place are honest, clean, and incorruptible. It is a tough job. It is tougher than finding a partner for marriage, but we have to do it. We have to identify who is. However, even when you identify, you must have guidelines so that that person, because we are subject to change and we are capable of changing no matter what. Nobody was born bad, but we can become bad if the conditions allow us to be bad. We must have guidelines which will put these new leaders in their proper perspective. For example, when we advocate a federal system of government, it is denying the leader to sit here and feel comfortable and say, oh, you know what? I appoint my wife to be head of Karamoja because I know there is gold. We're going to dig that gold and become rich. Or I appoint my son to be this because that way I can protect my rear end. No, there has to be a system within which you are going to operate. The federal system is going to give us the guideline. You cannot sit here and appoint your wife or your girlfriend. You know, you all know, I mean, this is not new to all Ugandans. Almost all the women Museveni has put in position have done their interview in his bedroom. That cannot work in a new Uganda. Simply because you had that woman doing an interview in your bedroom, then she deserves to be minister, vice president, or ambassador. Heck no. It is not going to work in a new Uganda. There must be checks and balances that how does one become an ambassador or a minister or whatever. The system of administration, you can't sit here and say, oh, I need to find a new position for my new girlfriend. Let me declare Natete now is a new district. So I'll make her district commissioner in Natete. And by the way, she is not too far. I can always reach Natete. And she can come to my bedroom anytime I want. That is not going to work in any Uganda. Okay? Because they were there. You are not the one who is responsible for demarcating what is a new district. This nonsense we have right now, look at the representation in the parliament. Western Uganda has about 190 members of parliament. Uganda, Northern region, and the Eastern region have less members of parliament than Western region. And you tell me that you are going to participate in such elections as an MOP from Masaka or from Busoga. The first thing you should do is boycott the whole damn thing. Because it is
Of course.
ugly, wrong from the start. I cannot play in this kind of nonsense. But our people don't have eyes because they are looking at the 300 million shillings they are going to get. So let me become a member of parliament. After I'm going to eat, and when I go back to Wikwe or honorable. And that's what I'm looking for. No, that's not the kind of leadership we're talking about. we need to redefine ourselves. We need to redefine our choice of leaders. And we should not allow this kind of nonsense to prevail. So, those people who are corrupt, yes, you asked whether we should hold them accountable. Here in America, I found this out at one time, that if robbers, people who will go to break in a bank and rob the bank, and I stay in the car with the engine running, that as soon as they run out of the bank with the bags of money, I have the doors open, they jump in the car, and I drive off. Once the police catch us, I cannot claim to be innocent because I didn't get into the bank. I did not rob the bank. I did not break the doors. I did not pick up the money. I was just on the steering wheel and I just drove them away. I am part of the thieves. Okay?
Yeah.
Because the act of bank robbery to succeed. Now, you may not have participated directly in the crimes that Museveni has committed, but you have done the intellectual work, the media misrepresentation, like this uncle of Muhozi. What is his name? Mwenda?
What is his name? Yeah.
You know, he, that uncle of Muhozi. He has not directly participated in the crimes. He has journalistic skills to mislead the public and lie to the public that these acts have not taken place. He is part of the criminal gang, pure and simple. And when the has to get his share, we are not going to let these people off the hook simply because at this moment they were occupying either big religious positions or they are occupying media position. If you remember, in the Nuremberg trial, there were many journalists who were brought to trial, and they were hung for the crimes of enabling the Nazis to commit the mass crimes they committed. So you cannot say, I was just a journalist. No, sir. Even a journalist must have morals. And you denounced your morals.
Of course.
Even a religious leader, like that bishop I quoted to you in my previous presentations on here. The bishop who ran off the podium in Rome because he was telling lies, covering up on the Tutsi killings of innocent people, refugees in the Congo. That bishop should be brought on to the carpet because he is enabling the crime. And I don't care whether he's an anointed bishop or no. You are not supposed to be that criminal. All right? So those people who said, I don't match words, I just speak only when there is insanity in massacre, those people must be brought to the carpet because the wealth they are now enjoying is a result of the corruption and the robbery by the system in which they have been operating.
Yeah. And I think that brings me to the next question because it's a question for us whereby there is a realization. I think you said something that was very key. You cannot give what you don't have. You cannot go and participate in a corrupt government. And I think maybe this is for us and our viewers, and maybe not the ones who've been with us long enough, but for people who are joining and people who are coming to this awakening, for us to finally understand and come to terms with the fact that there was no going to Museveni's government or parliament was in no answer to our problems and remains no possible answer to our problems. The system that is in place now of governance is the sickness. Museveni is just a symptom of it. And if you could please speak to that, because it seemed it was better to just boycott the whole process and the whole electoral process. But it seems like even after the catastrophe, we have people actually prepping themselves for a campaign season for 2026 elections when no closure, no solutions, no accountability has been offered. But in terms of going forward and actually looking at where things could go, if you could please speak to that, the system itself being the problem, Museveni being a symptom, so that we all have that not participating in this system anymore or giving it any legitimacy might be a key to us finally relieving ourselves from it all and starting anew.
Yeah. If you look at all the characters within the system, I think some bloggers have made it very clear that we have a mafia group which is run by Museveni and his family, and the extended family of Batusi from Rwanda, Congo, Burundi, and everywhere. Now, that is the inner circle. But they need and they use other people in order to sustain that system. Okay? The suffering of Ugandans, ranging from the total destruction of the infrastructure in the country, the education, the medical services, the economy, and the destruction of human lives is self-evident. You don't have to narrate it anymore. Everyone knows it. Ask these fellows who claim to be participating within the NRM government and those who claim to be on the opposition. Other than voting for everything Museveni demands, ask them which one of you, including the man who was just poisoned, Oranya, was in parliament for how many years? 10 years or 15 years, they say? I don't know. Even if he was there for 3 years.
Still.
Ask these guys, how many times did you bring up an issue of defending your own constituency where you come from, or your own tribe where you come from, or the entire Uganda to which you claim to belong? At least you brought it and failed to pass it. How many times? You are not going to find more than one who may have said something to do with exposing the suffering of their own members of parliament are being wrongfully tortured and imprisoned, and they are still sitting there like pumpkins. They cannot in parliament. They cannot defend their own people at the hands of these invaders, only to hear of them driving to Gulu to meet with Salim Saleh, who is who is actually the vice president of Uganda.
Yeah.
And they go there to get money. Here they go to Rabogo's hotel at night in Bunga to get money from Rabogo. the money that he's getting out of selling the internal organs of our own people. And once they get that money, they are satisfied. Just like hyenas. Yeah, I mean, they have reduced themselves to as long as they got a piece of a bone, they are happy. They run, they don't even walk. They run with that piece of bone and they go back to Masaka or to Buyikwe or to Iganga or to Gulu or Kitigum and they say, Alhamdulillah, I got a piece of bone. This is the tragedy. You
Hyenas
cannot
even.
do what you don't have. Yeah, they are all hyenas. Now, what we need as Ugandans is to be able to stand up to these people and tell them, no, you are not Mr. Honorable because you have disgraced the position you are in. We do not call you honorable anymore. I really don't want to call any of those guys honorables because they are not honorable. Okay? Now, we need to put pressure on them that they should remember. As I said, starting this thing, when I received the confirmation, they asked me, "Do you denounce Satan?" Yes, I do. Not, I denounce Satan. You denounce Satan and all his tricks and activities. Yes, I do. Now, how can you denounce Satan and eat with Satan? Because this man is worse than a devil. He's a killer. He's a thief. He's a robber. He's everything evil. And you go there and praise him the way our brother Olanya praised him that, Mr. President, you have rebuilt this country. Come on. Come on. I don't even have the right word to use about describing that kind of a person. And by the way, there are many of those. There are many of those. Some of them have started displaying their basic stupidity, if I could call it that they don't even know the difference between the United States and the UK. That's why they can come up and run their mouth just pumping hot air out of there that he died in Seattle, UK. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's more than ridiculous.
It's becoming embarrassing.
Well, lucky enough, I'm not embarrassed because I'm not a part of that kind of stupidity. I don't share that kind of view. These people ought to be thrown out and they ought to be brought to the carpet. Let them pay the price for their crimes. Because they are crimes of commission and the crimes of omission. And they are more crimes of omission than they are crimes of commission. And we can't leave these people out of the loop. No, we have to bring them to the carpet.
Yeah. I see. So I think then before we take, our next break, and then the next question that I'm going to ask is going to be in regard to, of course, when you were talking earlier on about the plan that was already in place before, of course, former President Geoffrey Binaisa was overthrown, there was a whole program to really, materialize the idea that if someone had the ability to in a nation, they could go out and work and be able to feed themselves, and how far away we are from that to now the idea of investors, aka foreigners, who come into the nation and own most of the capital that we own, looking at redistributing everything back. You did talk about, of course, having like a good system that has, the supervisory bodies and also has the participators as well participating. But I guess today the main question that I have is, as we speak about a federal system, as we speak about a federal system and actually having federal governance based off of our indigenous ethnicities and who we are, uh, and I think this will happen naturally over time because Botswana gives a good example of it, where you have now the indigenous practices, and also a lot of nations in Latin America, a good example, where indigenous ways and indigenous knowledge and the principles or value systems that have been governing not only the economics but also just the basic value systems from those groups start to infiltrate into the newly formed form of leadership. Because, of course, in Uganda's case, with this being introduced, there is a decolonial process that is happening with us bringing our indigeneity to the forefront of our leadership and of our nation building and our self identity. How would this then further in the long term be merged together in the union of us as a nation, I guess, is the question that I have. Because we talk about self-determination and sovereignty, there is going to be uh, in Karamoja, there's different beliefs and different forms of leadership and how self-determination will work there, versus in Buganda how self-determination will work there as well. And then within the unison of Uganda as a whole, for us as people to start envisioning, because as you said, we have to have our feet grounded and our mind in the clouds. We have to start being able to grasp this vision of union amongst each other, based off, of course, where we're groupings. If you can speak to that as well, how does that partnership and collaboration work with? Because our minds have been contaminated a lot with ideas of tribalism and have been derailed way too
There is,
much with ideas of tribal isolation.
well, there is nothing ugly or evil in tribalism because, as I said, none
Yeah.
of us ever bribed God to create me what I am. It was God's choice, and I'm grateful to God for having created me of this particular tribe at that particular time. Now, when we talk about
Yeah.
federalism, we put the power in the hands of the local people. The local people are the
Mm.
ones who are going to determine what they want for themselves, how they want it, and who wants it. They are the only
Yeah.
parameter we're going to give them that is that you have to zero in on indigenous Ugandans first and foremost. This
Mm.
bullshit of glorifying foreigners as angelic investors has to stop.
Mm.
Okay? Once we have the people in charge of their own social, economic, and cultural ways, else. For example, a Muganda
Mm.
woman worth the name knows how to take care of the banana plantation or suku. You don't have to come from the
Mm.
UN to teach that woman how to take care of the banana plantation. I mean, by virtue of being a Uganda woman, she knows what it takes. Okay? All you got to do is make sure that
Mm.
Banange or banana plantation is doing okay. Maybe the agriculture officer can add on one thing and say, if there is a problem with the fertilization, there is this fertilizer,
Mm.
which is, uh, and I'm not recommending chemical fertilizers because those are the ones which have caused a lot of calamity in our banana production. But there is a natural way using cow
Yeah.
dung or using grass to cover the
Mm.
plantation and they keep the moist. They will do it. Now, when it
Mm.
comes to businesses, as I said, we shall definitely need an investment fund. There is no way you can do without capital. Capital is vital. As I brought the idea of a carpenter, a carpenter may
Mm.
need some capital to buy equipment. to be able to expand his production. Now, on top of that, we have to localize our distribution of contracts. If we are repairing this school, or let me use the word like Calisizo, near where I come from. If we have to rehabilitate that hospital at Calisizo, why do we bring a Chinese to produce the windows, the doors, the beds? No. We are going to find a local carpenter there. If he says, in order to fulfill the contract, he needs maybe he needs $1,000 loan to buy new electric equipment to expand his production, or to buy so much lumber so that we want him to manufacture, we give him the credit. That's what all countries do, including the United States and the United Kingdom. Give him the credit, let him buy the lumber, all the equipment, expand his production, produce the doors and the windows for that Calisizo hospital. Don't bring the Chinese. You bring the Chinese, and you have your own local people staying there unemployed and poor. And the Chinese makes the money and flies off back to Beijing without money. That is not going to work. Because I know that we have many qualified people in Uganda, in every tribe, that can do this kind of work. If we need to build a new road between the Jinja and the Iganga, we have our own engineers who could supervise this construction of this road. That's why we sent them to school. I told you last time that I found a Musoga engineer who is now in charge of advising the Secretary of Transport in the state of Pennsylvania how to build the roads and the bridges of the state of Pennsylvania. This man should be in Uganda today, building roads in not only Musoga, where he comes from, but all of Uganda. I was in Namibia many years ago, and the man who is the top engineer for building roads, including the Kalahari Highway, which connects Namibia and Botswana, was a Muganda engineer. And there he was in Namibia. And the way they protect him, my God, like a gold mine, because they got this African who can do it. And yet, look at what is going on in Uganda. How many times has the road from Kampala to Masaka in Uganda broken down and people die?
So many
Yet
times.
Our son is in Namibia. Yes. Now, on this point, I am appealing to all of you Ugandans who have technical and professional talent. I think I'm going to ask our friends at UNN, make a tally of these guys. We need them immediately after we get rid of this Banyarwanda. We need you back in Uganda. Contribute your training, your experience, your brains. And I'm not including those hooligans. Like we had one here who was in a prison on drug dealing. He went back to Uganda and claimed to be a businessman who can construct a road in Buyikwe. He stole a lot of money, ended up at Louisiana. The guy didn't. He was a high school dropout and a drug dealer, and now he's coming to Uganda and posing as if, oh, he's a wonderful guy from America. He knows all this kind of crap. He's an investor. He's a businessman. Come on. That's not what we are talking about. Give us your name, your qualifications, which can be verified that you are really what you claim to be, and we shall use you in rebuilding Uganda. Now, no business should be given to a foreigner, no contract should be given to a foreigner unless we can't find a Ugandan who can do it.
To do it.
And once we find the Ugandan, then all the local contracts must be awarded to Ugandans. not because you are my brother-in-law or your sister is my girlfriend or whatever. No, that ain't going to work. And we must be able to supervise these people. We don't simply give them, and as in Uganda we say, oh, because he got the contract, he's untouchable. No, we have to make sure that all the money is spent honorably and honestly, and the job is done as prescribed. Now, you've heard of buildings collapsing because instead of putting in 5 bags of cement in the sand, they put one so that they can minimize, and they built the whole stupid structure on nothing but sand without any cement. Now, if we give you a contract to build that building, whether it is for a school or a shopping mall or a hospital, and it collapses because of that kind of stupid behavior, we're going to charge you for murder, because the people who died
Of
as a
course,
result of your stupidity and robbery. Well, you can call it negligence, but I think I will call it robbery. You decided to steal so that people can die. We're going to put you on the carpet. By the way, you may even be charged of capital punishment, and we put you on, at Ruzira and hang you up. I mean, these kind of crimes cannot be tolerated anymore, professional or otherwise. We cannot tolerate that kind of nonsense. We have to build a new Uganda which is run according to the law and according to professional efficiency. Now, you remember very well when President Magufuli took power. I recall listening to his speech. He said, now I have been put in State House, and I'm sending a warning to all you, my brothers and sisters, cousins, nephews, whatever, former classmates and the former playmates. Don't come to State House saying, hey, Ndugu. There is no such a thing. I am here to do the nation's job. And this Ndugu business remains over there. and he, I think he even said, I am sending the I have a wife who will cook for me. So no, we have the honesty has to start with you, and it will radiate from you and spread to others. And we have to keep the torch burning so that we know nobody is going to hide in the shadow of darkness and they do crazy things, because we are going to find you.
For sure, for sure. Thank you so much. And I think you reminded me, from where it started. You reminded all of us today, even, what was it? There was this quote that when the word tribe is used by, from the context that we're used from hearing it, it's never used in a good way. But that also you've reminded me of certain values, like we should value, regardless of how it's perceived or received, we should just value that we are that. And hopefully everyone who's been watching today has found points and pockets of this conversation where you could start to, manifest and appreciate who and where you come from, but also start to get more of envisioning for what Uganda could be and how you participate in it. Because if it had to be done by 2 people, 3 people, we would not be here, every other Sunday or every other program. There's an understanding that this is gonna take all our effort, and the more we learn, as I always say here, you learn something, teach other people to go with it. Teach one, let those ones teach 10, and then those 10 will teach the next. So let's carry the information we got here with us and take it forth and, be the messenger, be the student, be the teacher always. And I want to thank our guest today. Thank you so much. I appreciate that you've been here with us today and you've brought all this immense knowledge to us today. And please, before our guest comes on to bid farewell to the audience, I'd like to say that another senior is coming, immense knowledge, a lot of experience. Senior Gombia will be taken on the stage next, right after we finish this show today, and it's going to be covering why the West is yet to indict Museveni for the war crimes that is committed. Museveni has committed very many acts of genocide, not just war, especially genocide in the Congo, genocide in Uganda, genocide in Rwanda as well itself. So do make sure to tune in to that show. But without further delay, I would like for you, Senior Remigius, to please come on and say some bidding farewell words to our audience. And it's with deep appreciation that I thank you for doing this today. Uh, it's been it's it's been a it's been a good experience, a good show to be a part of. I remain honored.
Thank you very much. Well, you have asked me to say something in summation. My message to all fellow Ugandans is let us rediscover being principled people, men and women. Let's have some principles that we can bite on and hang on and be willing to die for. Let us be principled in our behavior, in our politics, in our defense for our country. Because if we don't have principles, we are like there is a machine we used to have at my school many years ago called the wind vane. Whichever direction the wind blows, you go. Whichever direction
It
blows,
goes.
you go. Wind vane. Let us have principles. Let it be known that people can turn around and say, I know that woman, I know that man. I remember one time I was talking to a policeman and he said, I have covered this area. If there is a crime in this area, I know which homes I will not even bother going to because I know those people cannot do anything like that. But there are some families, the first thing that comes to my mind, what happened? Someone's car was broken in and they took off all the wheels. I go to Peter's home, check on his sons because I know those are the children who are most likely to commit this kind of crime. But I will not bother with Joseph's family because I know that family. Even their dog cannot bite anybody. That is what we need to be. Secondly, I am appealing to all of you Ugandans who are in the diaspora, who are medical doctors, who are engineers, university professors. It is sad when you look at Makerere University. The quality has gone so down that even the high school where my grandson is going to right now is better than Makerere University. We have to rebuild. So it is you, and I'm going to ask Mwami Chimbugwe to help us. Let us find a way of identifying and keeping a record of our rich and I would say enormous rich human resource that is in the diaspora because we are going to need you. Without you, we cannot rebuild Uganda. Because these young men, yes, they have made a lot of noise. They have kept Museveni and his SFC busy. He has tear gassed them and they have withstood all that pain. And I salute them for what they have done. But we need more than that. Uganda is going to be rebuilt by the brains which are now in the diaspora. We shall need you. If we need to find a way of assisting in your transportation back to Uganda. We will discuss it at a later time. But let us all focus on rebuilding Uganda. But that rebuilding has to start with you. First, rebuild your morals. Don't look into terms of corruption, stealing. That is not going to work in any Uganda. Let us give service to our country. If not for our sake, at least for our children and grandchildren's sake. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And thank you so much for those closing words. And, just to add on, I think one of my favorite words as we look to rebuild our country, especially, I did point out people in the diaspora and the brain drain that has happened, and the Ugandan brains that are in the diaspora. I hope that we all remember that it is not worth much if it only functions for you and not for your people. Let us survive in union and not survive individually, because we're only killing ourselves if we try to survive individually and not as a group. Thank you for everyone who's tuned in and been with us today. We'll be back next Sunday. As always, sorry we adjusted the time without actually, I didn't mention last week that we would be adjusting the time, but from now onwards, we'll be coming a little bit earlier than we usually come. We'll be here the same time we came, which was 5 p.m. UK time, 7 p.m. Uganda time. Until we meet again, akume atakumira mpera, Godspeed.